My name is Frits Veltink.
My name is Aleman. We're Dutch, as you can see.
We're Dutch, and we show.
Yep.
Everybody knows this gadget? Let's see if it works. Glass, give me light. Damn, that's the wrong way. I asked for glass, give me light.
Some coding error, I think.
Let's do it again. Glass, give me light.
Yes, it works.
It works, it works. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Today, what we want to do in a brief overview of 20 minutes time. Oh, we still got 25, you see?
Yeah,
the clock is not ticking, so that's good. We want to take you on a little European tour to share what's some specifics about European landscape on cloud and what business challenges you're facing if you want to enter with your services into the European market.
Yep. And the good news is we are from Europe. The bad news is we have more experience actually entering the US market because that's what we've been doing much more. But we're going to share some of our experiences with you on if you plan and maybe should you even move to Europe. We have quite some content. It's actually impossible to cover all of this in 20 minutes, but we'll see how far we get. Good news is the slide deck will be online. And of course, if you do plan in moving up to Europe, come talk to us. We're happy to make introductions for you with the right people and companies in Europe to get started. So this is briefly the couple of things we want to talk about. We will start with an overview of Europe so that you guys actually understand what Europe is. Do you think we can do that in an hour?
Oh, I don't know. We'll try. No, otherwise we'll speed up. So let's skip this, I think, and get into the story. Wait. Jan, is this thing working okay? Because I hear some voices. Oh, okay. Oh, thanks. No, I know what it is. I think it's the NSA who's listening here into us and know what we're saying, you know, and want to hear if we're saying the right things, you know, in the right place, and maybe they can bust us at the airport for saying the wrong things. Why we have this statement, you know, it's important, and maybe we can have the next slide, Jan, we made some of these figures in Europe as well. It's NSA inside, and Europe is cloud ready, no problem. But data security is a huge issue in Europe. Yeah. And it's not only different in different countries. If you go to Germany, everybody's talking about Snowden. He's still in the paper every week. German government is taking all kinds of measurements to make new contracts, to make new SLAs, to convince companies to have their clouds within their own countries, within their own regions, you know, and that's a typical thing which is happening in Europe. So, are we cloud ready in Europe? Yes, no problem. Yeah. We say we are, but we have a huge offense against all kinds of things which might threat our identity and identity management. Everybody know this girl?
No, she doesn't want to be addressed as girl.
But is she a girl, Jan?
Well, that depends on what the technical definition of girl is.
Okay.
She prefers to be a person.
Yeah. Yeah. Her name is Conchita Wurst. And if you're from Germany, you would laugh because of the name Wurst. But she, actually it's a he, but she's becoming a she, was the winner of the Eurovision Song Contest 3 weeks ago, which is a huge event, a cultural event in Europe, you know. And she was representing here a community in Europe. She did really great, a great voice. It was really fantastic. But what was very curious and peculiar about this is that all countries, even on the eastern part, gave her a lot of votes which you would not expect from being someone as she or he is in this environment. This is typical European culture. And this, if you talk about Ukraine, if you talk about the Cold War, it ended late 80s by breaking down of the German war in Berlin. But it's still there, of course, what we see now, what's happening in the Ukraine and with Russia and the Crimea. And you see the difference on European thinking and thinking around here. Because what's stated here is just let's send out by the EU a letter to Russia and say what they do actually is not possible. So we're pretty neat people. We don't rush too far in these kind of things and like to stand back if things get difficult. That's the way what we see, especially in this kind of situations. Jan.
So just to to recap, this is Europe. We put it up on a map for you. And actually in Europe, you like to make jokes about the fact that when we ask people, where is the Netherlands, to the average American, they always ask me, is that a place in Denmark? And then I realized that the other way around, most Americans may not know where on the map the Netherlands is, but the other way around, if you would ask a typical Dutch person, where is California? I actually did this recently to somebody, and they pointed to the right side of the US. And of course, you guys will know where, at least I hope you do, where California is based. But Europe, in a lot of senses, is very similar to the US. Europe, apart from the fact that instead of states, we have countries, there are a lot of things are similar. The economies, I think we have that on the next slide, don't we?
Yeah.
The economy of Europe compared to the US is actually slightly bigger. So that's a very big similarity. Then a big difference, obviously, is the fact that we have 28 countries. Well, you guys are one country. And then language is probably one of the big challenges. Also, if you're moving to Europe, that is probably going to be one of the key challenges, apart from the cultural differences that you'll be running into as well.
It says there we have one language.
You guys have a couple more languages nowadays. Yeah.
Have you been to significant parts of our country?
I have, yes. Yeah. Actually,
Yeah.
we should say a couple languages. Spanish should be on there at least, yeah.
Yeah.
And if you go to Chinatown, it's also a completely different story. And of course, the currencies in Europe, a lot of people think it's all euro, but most countries, most are in, 17 of them are in the euro, but there's also quite a few that are not in the euro, which can make it a currency challenge for software as well.
From a governmental perspective, what we do in the EU is some kind of like a federation. The EU and European Union is based in Brussels, and they do a lot of discussions on how they can manage cloud. Due to data restrictions, this kind of stuff, they try to build all kind of legislation around that, and there's pretty much going on right now. And one of the three main points is what they're trying to do there is what's stated here, cutting through the jungle of standards. Within the EU, they would like to see all kind of standards within cloud technology, within cloud processes, and within cloud contracts. And that's the second point. We're very protective towards end users and protective towards companies if they sign up a contract with SaaS providers and cloud providers, that they have safe and fair contracts. And the bad part is nowadays that these contracts are hugely different from country to country. Yeah? For instance, if you go to Germany, they should be like this, and the way you go up more north to the Nordics, they will become more thinner in the way you guys are doing it. And in some other countries, they even don't have contracts at all. So there's a huge difference here. The EU wants to standardize that, to drive the economy, to get cloud more accepted throughout the world. And that's the third point, is that the European Union itself and the governments will have a proactive policy on adapting cloud themselves. UK government is very far in that in the UK. They all defined all kinds of standards already for providers. They should be certified, they should have certain things, they should use certain contracts before they even could supply to a government environment. But if you do, and if you have these kind of requirements available, it becomes far more easy to do business there.
Eurocloud is one of the organizations that the SIA works with as well, that is trying to inform people about cloud, also tries to make a connection to the European government, to work with the government there, and also has divisions in each country so that the knowledge can be spread in a localized way. And if you consider moving to Europe, getting in touch with Eurocloud is a good way to start landing in the European market. This is your slide, I think, isn't it? There's a funny.
Oh, you don't know what it means.
I have no idea what it means. Orientation.
It's foggy.
Oh, okay, it's foggy.
It's what we want to share with you is what people are thinking about and what things are, you should take care of when you go into Europe and have a sight on that. The European market is a bit misty, and everybody there in every country is still seeking for directions on how to move and how to do business, And especially in the cloud, we all say we know what it is, but nobody knows, and that's the same in Europe, so everybody's seeking for good things, to make a good progression there. So maybe that's interesting to understand how the European economy is built. Jan already showed some figures, on gross products. But here you see a division from micro, small, and mid-sized companies. And what's the interesting part is that 92% of all companies are micro companies with less than 10 employees and less than 2 million revenues. So that's a lot of companies. Yeah. And if you look to the small companies and the mid-sized companies, you see they have a far lower effort on the economy in Europe than maybe average to here in the US.
Yep. So the other question, of course, is if you look at Europe, is it a challenge or is Europe a threat? So are European companies going to come here and take away your business? And that is already happening. A lot of European companies have started in the US, including my own company. We're quite successful in this market. If you look at Eastern Europe, there's a very strong technological base there. A lot of Eastern European countries are starting to build large and successful SaaS products. You'd be surprised actually to find that some products that may sound very American are actually built and owned by Eastern European companies. And if you look at the history, tradition, a lot of innovation has always come from Europe. At the same time, we believe that the only way to become successful is if you do enter the European market and not sit and wait until your potential upcoming European competitors come here and eat your lunch. It's better that you move to Europe and be successful there as well. So of course, if you look at the challenges and opportunities, this one is very, I would say this is the most important criteria to decide to go there. And maybe time is even more important than money. If you have no focus in doing a specific market, and at Servoy, we are now active in 12 countries. Some are more successful than others. And I've noticed that if you're not committed into going somewhere, into doing something, into sticking to the plans that you're making, you simply should not do it. Because time, you only have so much time in a day. Time is the only thing that is very difficult to multiply if it's your own time. And the other factor is, do you have the money, do you have the budget to go and move to a specific country? Of course, another important question, but this one is quite obvious, is there a market for your product? If you are active in a very specific vertical space, let's say you're...
Accounting?
Accounting is a great example. Probably HR, if there's a lot of payroll type of things involved, those business rules are going to be very different. Accounting software, it can be tough in Europe because every country has different rules, particularly on the tax side. So maybe your software is not the best to move to a different country. But a lot of generic products or even vertical solutions, like in logistics, for example, are very reusable across markets. And we've seen a lot of American companies be very successful with that. If you look at online, for example, then Salesforce is very successful in the European market. Oh, there's an example there. Mm-hmm. Of course, you'll also have to find out, do you already have competitors in Europe, and can you be better than those competitors, either on your business value that you deliver, or on maybe being cheaper than the European alternative. What are some of the issues?
Language, of course.
Languages.
Als je in Nederland komt, kun je wel met elkaar Nederlands gaan praten, maar dat wil nog niet zeggen gelijk dat je dan goed zaken met elkaar kunt doen.
Ja.
And if you go to Germany...
It's the Germans, yeah. The Germans is another So language, based on my own experience, I've lived in a couple of different European countries. It's very depending on the country you go to and depending on the market you're working in. For example, a more sales type of product like Salesforce, selling that in the Dutch market, you can get away with English. If you go to Germany, you would need it to be translated. Germans are much more used to software that runs in their own language. And if you go to the south of Europe, then even more so, because English is simply not there yet. The new generation, if you go now to Spain and you talk to the younger people, then you'll find that most do speak English. But if you talk to the older generation, they're like, ¿qué dices? No te entiendo.
No.
A culture is also can also be a challenge in the sense that through Europe, but I guess it's the same in the US. I guess if you're doing business in Texas, you do it differently than here in California. But culture can also be challenging in terms of how business is done. And if you talk to the Dutch are traders for hundreds of years already. So we like to do a deal. So if you give us a price, we will always ask you for a discount because we want to deal.
And negotiate on that.
And negotiate. And it has to be cheaper. That's always the rule number one, although I guess that's a universal thing, isn't it? Then if you go, for example, to Spain or to Italy, then trust is much more important. So in Spain, if you go in the first meeting, you don't talk about prices, you don't talk too much about business, but it's all about building up trust. If you don't do that properly, that can backfire to you, as I've personally experienced a couple of times in the Spanish market. Right. So I guess this bottom line one is also an interesting one.
Yeah, that's interesting, Jan, because nobody wants to pay for licensing in Europe.
Yeah.
You know, not even for Microsoft licensing, all this kind of stuff. We're copying a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're reusing it. We're doing it in the home front. We're doing it in businesses. It's a huge misuse of software over in Europe. From that perspective, SaaS and SaaS solutions might be a really good solution to do some solving over here. Yeah. But from the traditional software licensing culture, that's a huge issue.
Yeah. So. And of course, that's because people are used to not paying for licenses. I remember talking to a manager of Microsoft, and he said, we recently found out that we're very popular in Spain, but we sell very little licenses in that market. So it was 90% illegal usage of their product. With SaaS, that all goes away, but still, if you're selling, the willingness. I had a discussion once in Italy where somebody said, why do I have to pay for your software? You built it already anyway. So they don't see the added value as quickly as in the northern part of Europe. It's easier to get that out. This may or may not be a challenge, depending on where you are.
Depends where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I know, for example, that the Dutch people love US-based software. They love Microsoft. They love Oracle. At the same time, if you go to Germany, depending what type of customer you're talking to, I guess I was in Berlin, and they're much more pro-US because they save their asses. Yeah. Eventually. Same with the Dutch, by the way. Thank you for saving our asses in 1945. But in some cases in Germany, there's an aversion, in particular with the recent events of data, and of course, you as a US company can use that as well by having, by supporting the local laws for data, by running in a local data center. So there are ways in getting around that and using it to your benefit as well.
Yeah. And of course, Jan, that differentiates as well depending on the market where you operate in. Yeah. Because if you're selling into large corporate organizations who already have a global structure, that's a non-issue. They're used on doing business in that sense. But if you come in the mid-sized and low end of the market, that's definitely an issue to take care of.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's also an opportunity if you're a smaller organization. I know that I was talking to a German CIO of a large insurance company, and he said, we were implementing Salesforce, and we just canceled that 2 weeks ago. Because Salesforce with the recent events of NSA, cannot guarantee me that the data that I put into the system cannot be viewed by anybody else than our internal staff. And in Germany, there is a law that if the CIO cannot guarantee the data protection of his company, he is personally liable. He can personally go into jail for that. So he had to cancel that project because Salesforce was not willing to have a dedicated instance running for them. You know, as a smaller ISV, there's an opportunity for you to move into those companies and say, yes, we can guarantee that we will use a European hosting facility and have it set up in such a way, and there are legal ways to do that, even if you're a US company. So it's also an opportunity that you can use.
Absolutely.
Why is internet connectivity on? I have 100 megabit at home. So
yeah, so that's, from a European Union perspective, that's not a real issue anymore.
Yep. So it may be
everybody's connected.
Yep. Yep. And there are always ways around it. So we recently did a big implementation in Italy, and it was for pharmacies, and all those pharmacies took a SaaS-based product from one of our customers that used that technology to deliver it. And they said, so what do we do if our internet connection fails? And they came up with a fairly straightforward solution. They have a fixed internet connection, and they decided at the end of the day, we will use a fill-over 3G connection. 3G is quite widespread across Europe as a fill-over. So for a lot of seemingly complex problems, often there are simple technological solutions that you can use.
Pricing. Yeah,
Pricing.
we already discussed pricing a little bit.
Yeah,
not the willingness of pricing, but there's differentiate in valuing the pricing of software. Jan already mentioned the Italian example. You know, if you move throughout Europe, pricing are lowering. You know, so you have to think very carefully on how you put your service in the market, and if you want to differentiate in pricing, how you will do that, in which countries, with what contractual terms you want to have arranged around that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So basically, if you look at moving to Europe, there are globally three different ways in doing that. You can set up your own office. The first one can mean that you physically set up a physical office, but it could also mean that you decide we're a SaaS vendor, and we will start serving those customers from our American operation. Typically, if you look at setting up your own office, your cost and your risk is going to be higher because you're going to take an upfront investment. You'll have dedicated resources working on it. It's probably going to take more of your own time if you set it up. So in some cases, it may make more sense to work with a distributor or a reseller. And as Servoy, looking at my own experience, we have about 7 distributors of our technology in different countries. I would say the biggest challenge of finding a distributor is finding the right one. Is how are you going to pin in your specific market who is the best company to serve my technology and products. What we typically found is we started searching for distributors that were distributing older technology that was end of life. So there was a pain with those distributors because they started to lose revenue, and there was an opportunity to come in with a new technology such as we were at the time. So that's and I think you have some experience in distributorship as well, isn't it?
Yeah, distributorship and agentship. You know, Jan, what you said about setting up offices, that's very costful, and you're depending on if you have the right people on board. What we do with Atlantic Crossings, for instance, is that we have an agent-like construction that we act under the name on behalf of the US-based company. So there's complete transparency there, and we do it on a risk basis as well. So depending, you know, on the revenues that we are able to bring in for the organization, we get paid for that. You know, that gives a really good connection and a really good threshold to do that, and it's very cost-effective of getting started, you know, on the other side of the ocean.
Before we continue to some of the last slides, we're running out of time, so we want to make sure that if you have any questions, then now is the right time to raise your hand. Not everybody at once, please.
So you touched on some of the stuff like the CIO's CIOs going to jail, but how much effort should software companies plan on taking in order to meet European compliance? I mean, there's the right to be forgotten, and there's data governance. I mean, there's all these things. It just seemed like such a huge complexity for U.S.-based SaaS companies. How do you? What's your approach to addressing that?
Yeah, you mean specifically on compliance-like issues?
On compliance issues, right?
On all kind of compliance issues. Yeah, right. Yeah, well, that's a huge issue.
That
well,
are
we mentioned
European
that, but
specific,
I can tell you something about it. You know, it's a huge issue, and it's different on a country-by-country basis. Still, you know, I mentioned that the EU is working on getting that more harmonized, and they will. But still, there is still a strong local threshold on getting things done. We are facing in Europe the same issue. So what's happening is that we standardize our contracts and adapt what necessary is to that local circumstances. But a lot of European contracts are not even within the local law of these countries. And we just live with it. You know, it's something which is between the country and the European Union, and it's always some kind of a hassle, which we will come out at the end. You know, it's being seen in the US to do that. Is it a lot of work? It takes some time, you know, because if you talk about SLAs, contracts, all this kind of stuff. If you have a contract and an SLA which is within European-like perspective, then it's not too hard, you know, to get it added from the specific country-by-country basis you would like to do. But it takes time.
Yeah,
I think that's why we always say to start your business, do it preferably somewhere in the Nordics, in the Benelux regions, Scandinavia, UK, because there these issues are very, very low, and it gives yourself your own time, you know, to get things adapted and make the next move from that.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt in terms of not even having an understanding about what the level of effort is. I mean, contracts are one thing, obviously, but just it's a software designed from a security, data governance, and a privacy standpoint, and just trying to assess what the cost and time is in order to make the product, you know, EU ready.
Yeah, and that's, you know, very different. A couple of weeks ago, the EU sent out a message saying that Microsoft Azure complies with all rules and legislations to EU standards. Well, that's great for Microsoft, you know. But if you take that up and you go into Germany and you say, okay, you know, this is we are acting and operating within the law of the EU, the Germans say, okay, I don't care. So, you know, that's where the difference is. So that's how it's going to move forward. And I think that we will have that for a long, long time to cover that. But things will be made more simple by the government as well, because, and that's the big driver behind that, the government wants to go to the cloud as well because they see all the benefits, and they need standardization in contracts, in compliance, in rules, legislation, and certification-like stuff. So you can prove that the things you say you do can be audited by external parties, especially in financial and government environments, so they can send in their own accounting department and controls, you know, to do the check on if everything is in place, as you say, that is. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, my experience is if you're a smaller vendor like we are, Servoy is about 100 people worldwide, is to be pragmatic. Is to not try to have, you know, hundreds of legal contracts available, but depending on the situations you run into, to be pragmatic and address them with your customer. So in our case, you know, if we sell into healthcare into a specific country where there's specific rules, we will investigate then at that point in time when we run into the problem, is it worth for us going through the hassle, or do we just not go after this opportunity? And I think that's a better way if you're smaller. If you're larger, you can front load the work and do it all before you start. If you're a smaller organization, it's better to, you know, start. And as you run into issues, you address them with the locals. But I think we're out of time, isn't it, Frits?
Yeah.
That's a pity, because our most fun slide...
Okay, let's put it on.
Is...
But
okay.
Everybody will have it. I think we discussed most of this.
The conclusions you get as a homework, yes.
These are the conclusions.
Yeah.
And I think we should go to the end, because if you're going to go and you want to move to the European market, you know, think about it where you start. A lot of US-based companies go over to the UK, which it's pretty normal. It's the same language, cultural habits, and so forth and so on. But, you know, there are other countries which are even more attractive to be in. For instance, the Netherlands. Jan, maybe you can say something about that.
Because in the Netherlands, we Frits and I pay 55% income tax. And all of that money goes to US-based companies who get a tax discount. Because unlike, I cannot negotiate that rate with my government, but you guys, as Americans, can actually negotiate the amount of tax you wish to pay to the Dutch government. And that's the reason why both Google and Apple and Microsoft send all their money to the Netherlands.
From Europe?
They pay between 1% and 5% tax, a lot less than I do. So for you, this can be an extra reason to look at the Netherlands. And obviously, we were talking about Europe today, but because we're Dutch, we're now sort of self-promoting the Dutch economy a little bit. Because there are a few more benefits apart from tax.
Yeah, well, there are a few more. Jan, you already mentioned, we're a trading company. We're traders, you know. If you look from a cultural perspective, Dutch people are accepted throughout Europe as doing business and businessmen, you know. People are not offensive to us and they like us, you know, sometimes more than even the German. Jan, you have some joke on that, you know, what they always say about Germans and doing Dutch with, doing business with Dutch people.
Yeah, so I often do business in Germany, and recently one of my customers said, we really like doing business with the Dutch because you guys are like Germans, so you're on time, you're accurate, you know how to do engineering very properly, but you're also fun to deal with. So that's the difference between Dutch and Germans. I hope there are no Germans in the room that I'm offending now.
Any Germans here? No, okay, good. Another important part is, of course, the infrastructure. Jan already showed where we are on the map, and we are very close. We have the Amsterdam Internet Exchange, which is a very fast exchange towards the US as well. And we have a lot of international companies coming from the US who have their data centers over in the Netherlands. For instance, Google, who's got 2 data centers in the Netherlands. Microsoft Azure is running in the Netherlands. Microsoft bought just a huge environment to build a second data center in the Netherlands. So all this kind of infrastructure is there. Why are these companies coming over to the Netherlands? Well, that's got to do with that we are on average highly educated people. Yeah. And not only that, we speak several languages as well. We're a small country, 16 million people, but everybody is educated, multilingual. Only in Amsterdam there are living more than 200 different nationalities. So you can imagine that speaking all kinds of languages is within our veins and easy to do for the average Dutch guy or girl. I forgot to mention SoftLayer, which is the acquisition of IBM. The SoftLayer cloud is already running in Amsterdam as the first European data center which is operational. So Jan, I think enough things, you know, to consider if you come, that you land and expand starting off in the Netherlands.
Yeah, so thank you all for your time, and if you do have any questions, we run out of time, so feel free to ping Frits or myself after this show. We're going to be around. Thank you very much.
Thanks.